Obama wants deficit reduction, including tax increases for wealthy Americans and corporations. Congressional Republicans, prodded by a cadre of junior lawmakers, want a vastly smaller government constrained by lower taxes. The two are not the same thing.
On this vote, the yeas are 181, the nays are 233. The amendment is not adopted. The clerk will read the final lines of the bill.
This act may be cited as the Energy and Water Development and Related Agencies Appropriation Act, 2012.
The committee will be in order. Committee will be in order. Does the gentleman from New Jersey seek recognition?
Yes, I do. I move the committee now doth rise. Okay. Mr. Chairman, I move the committee do now rise and report the bill back to the House with sundry amendments, and with the recommendation that amendments be agreed to and that the bill as amended do pass.
The question is on the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. Accordingly, the committee rises. Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole House of the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 2354, directs me to report the same back to the House with sundry amendments, with the recommendation that the amendments be agreed to and that the bill as amended be passed.
The Chairman of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration the bill H.R. 2354 and reports the bill back to the House with sundry amendments adopted in the Committee of the Whole, with a recommendation that the amendments be adopted and that the bill as amended do pass. Under House Resolution 337, the previous question is ordered. Is a separate vote demanded on any amendment reported from the Committee on the Whole? If not, the Chair will put them ungrossed. The question is on the adoption of the amendments. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. The question is on engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
Bill making appropriations for energy and water development and related agencies for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2012, and for other purposes.
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York rise?
Speaker, I have a motion to recommit at the desk
Is the gentleman opposed to the bill?
in its current form.
The gentleman qualifies. The clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Owens of New York moves to recommit the bill H.R. 2354 to the Committee on Appropriations with instructions to report the same back to the House forthwith with the following amendment. Page 23, line 20, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $5 million. Page 32, lines 4 through 23, after the dollar amount, insert reduced by $7 million. Page 36, line 17, after the dollar amount, insert increased by $2 million.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This week, the Department of Defense acknowledged in their cybersecurity plan what many of us have known for some time, that cyberspace, like land, sea, and air, that we have defended for over 200 years, requires our continued vigilance to protect the nation. I offer this final amendment today to address this concern. I have in my district Fort Drum. I have a lengthy expanse of border between the United States and Canada, and like all of us, I have the electric grid, which is one of the areas that is most potentially struck by a cyber attack. I would also like to quote for you a statement by Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta, who noted in recent testimony, the next Pearl Harbor we confront could very well be a cyber attack that cripples our power systems, our grid, our security systems, our financial systems, our governmental systems. It's no secret that the Internet has become a critical component of our day-to-day lives. Every day across the globe, over 2 billion users get online to shop, do business, connect with friends and family, and a host of other activities. Cybersecurity affects clearly our national defense, all of our businesses, our schools, our seniors, in effect, all of us. Indeed, while the Internet has become one of our strongest capabilities, it has also emerged as a stunning vulnerability. We need only to look at recent cyber attacks on Sony, Lockheed Martin, and other enterprises to witness the extraordinary damage that can be caused from anywhere in the world at relatively little cost to those who carry out these actions. Hackers become more sophisticated by the hour. An attack could cripple Fort Drum, could cripple our national security, could cripple the electric grid, cripple health care, cripple our ability to pay our bills and to raise money. In effect, destroy our economy. We all know that if the electric grid were crippled, that we would be unable to get to work, we would be unable to keep people warm, to keep people cool, all things that we recognize as necessities. I offer this final amendment to increase cybersecurity in defense of the electric grid by $7 million. This modest increase keeps an eye towards our need to reduce the deficit while making needed investments to protect our most critical infrastructure. This final amendment is fully offset and will go a long way to protect the country from this emerging threat. I thank my colleagues for their time and ask that they join me by voting yes on this final amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
Is the gentleman from New Jersey opposed to the motion?
Yes, I am, Madam Chair.
The gentleman is recognized from New Jersey is recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, I stand in opposition to the motion to recommit. Our underlying bill already adequately funds cyber security and such grid activities, although much more work needs to be done to protect against the consistent attacks on our infrastructure and computing systems. As for the underlying legislation, it is truly a House product. It provides funds critical to our national defense. It helps maintain and rebuild our national infrastructure. It supports an economic climate to create jobs without government interference in the private sector. It also helps those devastated by the floods in the Midwest and South while fully offsetting that help. And it cuts funding in the entire energy and water budget down to near 2006 levels. Madam Speaker, ours is a strong bill. I urge our members to vote against the motion to recommit and for the underlying bill, and I yield back. Thank you.
Without objection, the previous question is ordered on the motion to recommit. The question is on the motion to recommit. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The noes have it. The motion is not agreed to.
Madam Speaker, I ask for a recorded vote.
The gentleman has asked for a recorded vote. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This, pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, the Chair will reduce to 5 minutes the minimum time for the electronic vote on the question of passage. This is a 15-minute vote.
A procedural vote, the last chance to change the energy and water spending bill before a vote on final passage. The measure contains funding for next fiscal year for the Energy Department, the Army Corps of Engineers, the Energy Department's Bureau of Reclamation, and several regional water and power authorities. Congressional Quarterly writing that it would provide about $2 billion less than current spending and just under $6 billion less than President Obama has requested. That's a reduction of almost 19%. This is a procedural vote. Up next, a vote on final passage of the Energy and Water Spending Bill. Congressional Quarterly writing that House Republican leaders abruptly shifted their strategy today, pulling back on a planned vote next week on an ambitious balanced budget amendment and replacing it with an alternative that would cut spending and put caps on discretionary and mandatory spending, but make those reductions contingent on later approval of a balanced budget amendment. Majority Leader Eric Cantor said the quote, cut, cap, and balance draft bill would provide a balanced approach so that we can demonstrate that we are in control. And Majority Whip Kevin McCarthy saying that the bill would, quote, remove any question that Republicans can do the bill on their own. That in Congressional Quarterly. Coming up next, a vote on final passage of the Energy and Water Spending Bill. Here's how the Washington Post is reporting about President Obama's press conference held a short time ago. The president said that he is still pushing for a big deal on deficit reduction, but he warned that time is running out for even a less ambitious option of simply raising the federal debt ceiling. He called on Republicans and Democrats to, quote, set politics aside and reach a deal by Saturday. We'll have all of today's updates on the debt limit talks after the House is out, including House Republicans and Senate Democrats, also the President from the White House. You can also see those things at cspan.org. The Associated Press writing that Rupert Murdoch's lieutenant, Rebecca Brooks, resigned today as chief executive of his British newspaper group. News Corp has also said it'll place advertisements in all national newspapers this weekend to apologize to the nation, to Britain, for activities of its journalists. Signed by Rupert Murdoch, the ad says News International is, quote, deeply sorry for the hurt caused by the phone hacking. Rupert Murdoch, his son James Murdoch, and Rebecca Brooks, the chief executive who resigned today, have all agreed to appear on Tuesday before a British parliamentary committee to answer questions about the phone hacking. We're going to have that live for you on C-SPAN 3, C-SPAN Radio, and cspan.org. That's at 9:30 a.m. Eastern.
On this vote, the yeas are 182, the nays are 232. The motion is not adopted. The questions on passage of the bill under Clause 10 of Rule 20, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
After a fairly long series of amendment votes, this is a vote on final passage of the Energy and Water Spending Bill. This measure contains funding for next fiscal year for the Energy Department, the Army Corps of Engineers, also several regional and water power authorities. It would provide about $2 billion less than current spending and just under $6 billion less than President Obama requested.
On this vote, the yeas are 219, the nays are 196. The bill is passed. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Madam Speaker, I present a privileged report for printing under the rule.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
Report to accompany H.R. 2551, a bill making appropriations for the legislative branch for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2012, and for other purposes.
Referred to the Union calendar and ordered printed pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 21. Points of order are reserved. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon rise?
Madam Speaker, on roll call vote 585, I inadvertently recorded my vote incorrectly. On the amendment offered by Representative Gosar, I intended to vote no. I ask unanimous consent that this statement appear in the record adjacent to roll call 585.
Without objection. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas rise?
Thank you, Madam. On vote on the Schiff Amendment on yesterday, which was July 14, 2011, I incorrectly voted no. I had asked unanimous consent that my correct vote be placed into the record as an aye vote for the Schiff Amendment on yesterday, July 14, 2011, to the Energy and Water Bill, to the Energy and Water Bill that was under consideration.
Without objection, the gentlewoman's statement will be entered in the record. Do I call it? For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to speak out of order for 1 minute for the purposes of asking the Majority Leader the schedule for the coming week.
Without objection, gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. And, Madam Speaker, I yield to the Majority Leader.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
I thank the gentlelady. I thank the Speaker. I thank the gentleman from Maryland, the Democratic whip, for yielding. Madam Speaker, on Monday, the House will meet at noon for morning hour and 2 p.m. for legislative business, with votes postponed until 6:30 p.m. This is a change from the legislative schedule that was announced at the end of last week. We will be sending out an announcement shortly so that all members are aware of this change. Again, Madam Speaker, the House will now convene on Monday of next week, not Tuesday. It is critical, Madam Speaker, that we solve our nation's fiscal problem and intend to schedule the House for legislative business as needed to accomplish that goal. Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order.
Gentleman is correct. The House will come to order. Please take your conversations outside. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, the House will meet at 10 a.m. for the morning hour and noon for legislative business. On Friday, the House will meet at 9 a.m. for legislative business. Last votes of the week are expected no later than 3 p.m. on Friday. Mr. Speaker, the House will consider a few bills under suspension of the rules on Monday, which will be announced by the close of business today. I do not expect any other legislative business besides suspensions on Monday. On Tuesday, the House will consider the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act, which would provide the President with an increase in the debt ceiling so long as cuts are made in the short term, spending caps are put in place over the coming years, and a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution is adopted so that we never find ourselves in this position again. I would encourage as many members as possible to participate in this important debate on Tuesday. During the remainder of the week, the House will consider legislation relating to the expiring authorization of the FAA, a series of bills reported by the Financial Services Committee that deal with the impending transfer of authority to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and finally, the legislative branch appropriations bill. Again, Mr. Speaker, I thank the gentleman from Maryland. I yield back my time.
This is the gentleman from Maryland.
I thank the gentleman for his information. I would say that it's my understanding now that we are, as the gentleman has pointed out, going to be meeting on Monday, and we'll be voting on Monday at 6:30 rather than commencing on Tuesday at 6:30. The gentleman has pointed out that that's to accommodate the challenge that confronts us and the crisis that we have been put in with reference to assuring, A, that the America does not default on its bills, and that we continue to pursue efforts to bring the deficit down and the debt under control. I say to my friend that it is late. He's right. We shouldn't confront this situation. We have on numerous occasions, of course, both the gentleman and I have voted in the past to extend the debt limit so that America paid the bills that it has incurred. The gentleman also notes that a piece of legislation was brought to the floor to ensure that we pay our bills. It was brought to the floor with the expressed intention by the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee that it be defeated. And, of course, it was defeated, and all your members voted against it, although over half of my members voted to make sure we pay our bills so that we did not get to this position. And the gentleman and I have been involved in efforts to reach agreement with the President, with the Senate, and with ourselves, with both sides of the aisle, so that we could not only provide for America's paying its bills, which, if it doesn't, will have very serious consequences to every household in America, every 401k pension program in America. And the gentleman and I agree, and everybody at the table with the President agreed, that allowing America to default on its bills was not something that any of us believed was a policy that was appropriate. I say to my friend, the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act, we've been confronted with this challenge for a long period of time. It was my understanding that you were going to bring to the floor next week a balanced budget amendment, which was announced and which I thought was coming and which we had told our members was coming. You have now substituted for that, as I understand it, am I correct, the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act. My understanding, there is no text for that act available at this time. Is that accurate? Am I correct that there's no text yet available for that bill? I yield.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, I would say back to the gentleman that the bill is currently being drafted and will be posted online later this evening, consistent with our 3-day layover requirement. Yield back.
I thank the gentleman for his comment. Given the fact that this, as the gentleman pointed out, this crisis has been known to us for over 5-6 months now that we were going to confront this. I understand that in the Cut, Cap, and Balance pledge that has been put forward, I don't know whether it's going to be put forward in the legislation, but the pledge says that your side, or the people who signed the pledge, whatever side they're on, are going to oppose any debt limit increase unless all 3 of the following conditions have been met. 1, substantial cuts in spending that will reduce the deficit next year and thereafter. It seems to me that we passed a budget through this House that does that. It doesn't reach balance, of course, until some 30 years from now. But secondly, it says, as a condition for voting for debt extension, that enforceable spending caps will put federal spending on a path to a balanced budget. As you know, we've had discussions in the White House on caps and what they apply to, whether that is a percentage of GDP or they're absolute caps in spending, which obviously escalate the denigration of the ability to deliver services over the years, depending upon the flexibility that's incorporated. I haven't seen the legislation, of course. And then thirdly, a balanced congressional passage, and then in parentheses it says, not mere support. Now, I know there's some people on this floor who have signed this agreement, so I presume that they're not going to vote to make sure America pays its bills on August 3rd. Congressional passage of a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution, but only if it includes both spending limitations and a supermajority for raising taxes, in addition to balancing revenues and expenses. Now, I presume that that requirement will have to come, according to this pledge, to get votes for which included this cut, cap, and balance requirement. Does the gentleman believe that the second two, at least, one could argue that we've already done the first in terms of made substantial cuts, and that we've discussed agreeing on making substantial cuts, but that the second two conditions cannot possibly be met between now and August 2nd? I yield.
Mr. Speaker, I'd say to the gentleman that, as he has heard me say before in those meetings and on this floor, I don't want to pass August 2nd without increasing the debt ceiling.
I understand that. Thank you,
I, as well as the gentleman, understand that there is a lot of uncertainty if that were to happen, a lot of risk associated with that, risk that I'm not willing to take. But to the gentleman's suggestion that it is imperative that we do that above all else, I would also add to that it is imperative that we demonstrate that we can arrive at meaningful solutions to the current fiscal crisis the country is facing. That is what the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act tries to achieve. It offers a way for us to cut spending in a meaningful way this year and throughout the budget window. It also suggests ways to enforce discretionary levels so that Congress can actually begin to do what all of us would like to see us do, which is to stop spending the money we don't have. The Cut, Cap, and Balance Act also provides for caps on total spending levels recommended in our budget resolution. These levels are spending as a share of GDP, and it provides, lastly, for ensuring that even beyond the 10 years that we actually can get back to balance. That's what the people of the country want. I know that the gentleman shares with me a desire to manage this situation back down to balance. So I'm hopeful that the gentleman and his colleagues on the other side of the aisle take a look at this legislation. As I said to the gentleman, it will be posted online to comply with our 3-day layover requirement to provide adequate notice to the public and members. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I'm not sure he answered my question with respect to conditions 2 and 3 of the cut, cap, and balance pledge, or, again, I haven't read the legislation, so I see the pledge. I'm not sure what's in the legislation. I thank the gentleman for his observation that we need a meaningful and I would say robust addressing of the problem that confronts us. As a fact, as you know, because we discussed it, at the White House for 4 days now, from Sunday night through last night, I guess 5 days, the President of the United States has been indicating that we need he calls it a grand design, if you will, along the lines that have been suggested by 2 of the commissions, which on a bipartisan basis recommended a grand design. That grand design would have reached at least $4 trillion in deficit reduction and debt reduction. And in fact, that is a figure somewhere close to the budget that was passed through this House. I might say to the gentleman parenthetically that it's my understanding that the cut, cap, and balance might get closer to the RSC numbers than your budget number that was passed here. The RSC number that I referred to, of course, was the amendment that was defeated on this floor by one vote. But I would say to the gentleman that the President wants to do a grand design to reduce that deficit, not by $1 trillion or $2 trillion or $3 trillion, but by $4 trillion. There was a commission on which, or a group, the Biden group we call it, in which the gentleman participated. There were other discussions between your Speaker and the President, all looking at achieving a large deficit reduction. The gentleman at some point in time decided that was not something that he wanted to continue working on, and suggested that it be, I suppose, pushed up to the line, and it was. As I said, the President was for a grand design. The Leader of the Senate, Mr. Reid, was for that. Mr. Durbin was for it. Ms. Pelosi was for it. I was for it. The Vice President was for it. But unfortunately, we couldn't proceed on that discussion in a successful way, at least, because the gentleman observed and his colleagues observed that as long as there were any revenues attached to that, it would not be acceptable to your side of the aisle. Notwithstanding that, every bipartisan commission that has dealt with this issue has indicated that it needed to be a balanced package, that it needed to include substantial cuts. It needed to deal with discretionary spending, defense spending, and entitlement spending, and it needed to deal with tax expenditures. The gentleman says correctly that we want to balance our revenues with our expenditures. The problem is if you keep cutting revenues, you're just going to be chasing yourself down. Obviously, you want to bring revenue rates down. I hope we can do that. But if we bring them down to a place where we don't have the money to pay for what we buy, which is, of course, what happened in this past decade, then we will be confronted with a situation the gentleman wants to avoid, and that is raising the debt limit. What we have done over the last 10 years is buy more than we could afford, and therefore we have a debt. That's why the gentleman, as I say, voted for extending debt limits. That's why I voted for it. I tell the gentleman that I have a Gallup poll here that says 74% of the Republicans agree that a responsible deficit reduction plan should include both tax increases and spending cuts. And 77% of independents believe the plan should include a mix of revenue and spending cuts. I say that so that I can elicit from the gentleman, I know there is sentiment on your side of the aisle. I know there's sentiment on my side of the aisle. And I told you, and you know, the President of the United States believes this as well, that we have an opportunity, a critical time in our history, when we have the makings of a bipartisan agreement, creation of a bipartisan consensus that will move us in the direction that you and I know we have to move. And what is holding us up, as I understand it, is that your side believes that these 77% of independents, 74% of Republicans are not correct, that revenues ought not to be part of this package. Clearly, we agree and have agreed that spending cuts need to be a part of it. So I asked the gentleman, is there any possibility that these 74% of Republicans are correct, that in fact if we're going to have a successful package, it will be because it is balanced. Because my view is, I tell my friend, that if we do this, it's going to really help create jobs. Now, we haven't done any jobs bills, we believe, in this Congress. We believe the only jobs bill you really did so far was the patent bill. I know you're going to talk about all these bills that you did, but we don't think that because you put jobs in the title, it makes them a jobs bill. But the fact of the matter is that if we can create confidence in the markets, if we can create confidence that we can deal with our fiscal situation in a responsible, bipartisan, collegial way, it will have an extraordinarily positive effect on every household in America, confidence of America that we can work together in a bipartisan way and will stabilize the markets and provide for our paying our bills and bringing our deficit and debt down. So I ask my friend again, does he believe there is any possibility at this point in time that we can reach a balanced agreement on what is called a grand design along the lines of the Bipartisan Commission's recommendations?
Does the gentleman yield?
I certainly yield to my friend.
Thank you, gentleman. Mr. Speaker, first of all, I would say regarding the gentleman's discussion about what happened at the White House this week and my insistence that the President's at least statements in that meeting, because we don't know what the details were of his proposal on the so-called big deal. My insistence was consistent with our speakers that we not raise taxes. And that's why that construct doesn't work. We don't have the votes on this side of the aisle. I'm not supportive of raising taxes on people who are trying to make it right now and can't. So I would say the gentleman, when he refers to the other groups that have been out there, all of whom he suggests that somehow we need to raise taxes, what the gentleman's talking about is how are we going to produce more revenues. We believe, Mr. Speaker, that you produce more revenues by having growth in our economy. We don't believe that you promote growth in the economy by cranking up the government spending machine, by taking money from people who earn it, washing it through Washington's bureaucracy, and sending it back out. We don't believe that. We believe that growth is created through investment, through hard work in the private sector, by entrepreneurs, small business men and women, people who want to succeed but want to earn their success and are not waiting for government to grant it to them. So I'd say to the gentleman, if the aim is for us to create more revenues, one word in response, it's growth. I would say to the gentleman, as far as his reference to the Gallup poll, and when he says that overwhelmingly people in this country want to have taxes raised as part of the so-called solution to our problem.
Will the gentleman yield on that? Because I didn't say that.
I will yield to the gentleman when I'm finished. Yield back when I'm finished. To the gentleman's suggestion that that's where the American public is, I just disagree. I haven't talked to anybody right now when we've got unemployment over 9% officially, when people are out of work and month after month can't find a job, when small business people are having trouble just keeping the lights on. I don't talk to anybody that says, please raise my taxes. And so that's what we should be focused on, are the hard-working people, the people of this country who want a job, who want to see this economy return to growth. They're the ones who understand that it's cutting taxes, it's cutting the overly burdensome regulatory system in this town that will bring back middle-class jobs. And so to the gentleman's suggestion that somehow we've not been talking about jobs in this institution, I know it's not surprising to him that I disagree with that.
It is not.
Right. Because I say to the gentleman, week after week we brought bills to the floor, yes, that deal with our fiscal situation, that cut spending, because we've got to address that, just like people address it in their homes, their families, their businesses. But we brought numerous bills, week after week, to the floor that go to the root of the cause of uncertainty in the business community in this country, and that is Washington's overly aggressive and burdensome regulatory reach. We have got to get back to a growth posture, Mr. Speaker, and that means cut spending, lower taxes, and implement a balanced and sensible pro-growth regulatory system, as well as finally, hopefully, returning to a monetary policy that promotes a strong dollar. And I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for yielding back. First of all, of course, I didn't say, I don't think anybody wants their taxes raised, including me. I'd like to have all the prices for things I buy cut in half, 50% off sale. We all like that. I like going and using my credit card. It's so much easier, and that's why credit cards encourage the economy. But you and I both know what happens when you use your credit card. At some point in time, you get a bill. And the people who sold you the good or loaned you the money expect you to pay them. And I will tell my friend that I understand what he's saying. We have just come through arguably the worst recession that we've experienced since the Great Depression. It was consistent with economic policies. This, by the way, started, as you know, in December 2007, in which we lost 8 million jobs. But the gentleman continues every time to say he wants to have policies which in 91 and 93 were argued were policies. We're going to grow our economy, expand jobs, and have those folks that you talk about do well. Now, I asked the gentleman, he misrepresents our position. I want to make it very clear. We are not for asking people who are trying to make it in America. We are not for asking those who are struggling in America. We're not asking for those who rely on Social Security. We're not asking for those who rely on their Medicare benefits to pay the burden of the spending that we have been involved in over the last decade, which took us from $5.6 trillion of debt to over $10 trillion of debt. We're not asking for those struggling Americans, which the gentleman raises as the specter of those we think ought to pay their fair share. Oh, no. We're asking for those who have done extraordinarily well over the last decade, who have made millions per year over the last decade, some billions of dollars over the last decade. Oil companies who are now making the biggest profits they've ever made, and others to pay a little more so that we can stabilize the finances of America. So don't represent that it's Democrats who are asking those struggling small business people. We're not doing that. Or those struggling working people in America who, by the way, have been stuck in the mud under the economic policies that were pursued consistent with the 2001 and 2003 economic programs, which has seen a growing disparity between working people and the wealthiest people in America. Now, we can continue on that path and put on the backs of those struggling people you talk about, my friend, the responsibility to pay for things, or we can have a fair and balanced program. That's what the 74% in the Gallup poll want. They don't want their taxes raised. What they want is a fair and balanced obligation, a fair and balanced participation and contribution to paying the debts of this country that we've incurred, and we've incurred them together. You're not all responsible. We're not all responsible. Now, on our side of the aisle, as you well know, this deficit was increased by almost 90% under the Bush economic policies, far less than that under the Clinton economic policies. As a matter of fact, about half. But that's not the issue. Both. The debt went up. We're confronted with it. We got to pay it. You and I believe not paying it's not an option. The Chamber of Commerce says clearly that they urge all of us that first, it is critical the U.S. government not default in any way on its fiscal obligations. And the President of the United States and our side has said, you bet, we don't want to do that. So let's ask all of us to come to the table, and those who can't afford it ought not to be asked. But those who can should be asked to do so. Not to penalize them, but to say that we're all in this together. And those who are the best off in America, those corporations like the oil companies who are getting subsidies at this point in time, who said they didn't need subsidies if oil was over $55 per barrel. They testified in Congress some years ago to that fact. It's been twice that, and we're still giving them subsidies. All we're saying is that doesn't make sense, and we ought to have a balanced program, and that's what those 74% and 77% of independents are saying. They're not saying they want their taxes raised. They're not saying we ought to raise taxes and incur more debt. They are saying we ought to pay our bills. They are saying that we ought to have a fair participation by all Americans in meeting this crisis that confronts us. And I would hope that over the next 3 weeks that we could get to a place where we come together in a bipartisan way and ask all of us to participate. And those who can help us confront this, bring this deficit down, balance our budget, and those who can't, but who are working hard to make themselves and their families live a quality of life, we'll help them out. And I think, as I said, we'll stabilize the economy, we'll grow jobs, and we'll have a better country. I would hope we could do that, Mr. Cantor, and I'm looking forward to it. Again, I don't know that this cut, cap, and balance will get us there, as I said, we're not going to get there clearly under those provisions between now and August 2nd, and I think the gentleman knows that, and I hope he has some other thoughts in mind, some other plan in mind. Obviously, there have been a number of plans talked about. The President gave a speech about his plan. That was rejected. The gentleman says it wasn't specifically line by line. That's right, because it was rejected before we got there. Mr. Boehner, your Speaker, discussed trying to get a construct. So perhaps you have a plan that is above and beyond the Cut, Cap, and Balance Act that we might see that would be a balanced plan that would help us. If the gentleman wants me to yield, I'll yield. No? I yield back to balance.